So now we are live. And my Facebook group, Co-Creative Destiny Weaving. And I'm very, very happy to introduce Sama Morningstar. And we have been collaborating on different projects. And as the word says, co-creation. The very first online summit you did, I think, 1.5 years ago. I think it was January 2018. You have done an online summit, co-creative feminine, or how was it called again? Definitely
right. It was the first summit I did was nurturing a free flow of feminine creative power.
Okay, so was it the second where we collaborated, where it had co-creation in the title?
It wasn't in the title of the summit, but it was a big focus. I had a Facebook group called for the summit speakers called the Co-Creative something or other, and co-creation is a big part of making a summit because everybody is creating it together. And so I've been all of them had co-creation as a foundation in it. And so I think you've participated in a couple of the summits that I've done, and might be remembering Facebook groups that I would make, or email list groups that I would make that were called the Co-Creative something or other.
Well, certainly the co-creative thread is connecting us. So you invited me in this first summit to talk about my sacred shamanic embroidery, and also in the last summit of yours around embodied Shakti, where we continued our conversation. And now something very interesting and exciting is also happening. Next week on October the 31st, your 9-month biomystical womb healing Moon Apprenticeship is going to start. And so I'm really excited to talk about that with you.
Yes, me too. Indeed. Did you want me to go ahead and just start sharing about that now, or did you have some?
Yes, please. I think you are best to talk about this apprenticeship of yours.
So it's called Biomystical Womb Healing 9-Moon Apprenticeship. So the 9 moons is 9 months, right? Our months are based on the moon calendar, and we have the calendar that's typically used around the world these days is a bit altered so that we only have 12 months, but there's actually 13 moon cycles in a year. But that number 13 has been associated with feminine power and therefore feared and maligned for a long time. And so that was the reason why the 12-month calendar was adopted, so as to avoid having 13 months. And it's interesting because there's cities, I know San Francisco for sure, in a certain neighborhood where there's numbered streets in the avenues of San Francisco in the Sunset District. There's no 13th Avenue. I used to live on 7th Avenue, and when you got to 13th Avenue, the street had a different name. And I always asked my parents, why isn't there 13th Avenue? And they said, oh, 13 is considered an unlucky number, and like that. And the origins of 13 being an unlucky number is because it's the number of months that we have in a lunar year, where our months are based on how many days it takes the moon to go through its cycles. And there's 13 of those in the year of how many days it takes the planet to go around the sun. And so that's a very powerful number, and it's associated with feminine power because the lunar cycles are very strongly connected to feminine menstrual cycles and feminine creative power and our ability to create new life within our womb. And so the moon has always been associated with that and associated with feminine power. And as is very obvious to anyone living these days, the patriarchal structure of our society has many, many, many belief systems and structures in place to suppress or dominate feminine power. And my biomystical womb healing 9-moon apprenticeship is my response to that fact and to the suffering that's caused, that everyone experiences because of this suppression of that feminine power and that the domination, the patriarchal domination of the feminine power. Because that domination model really limits our human potential, because it you know, we all internalize that domination inside of ourselves, where we've been taught to have our more masculine traits and these patriarchal ideas dominating our more feminine traits and abilities. And everyone has these, doesn't matter what gender you're in, and you identify with, or that you have, that your body expresses biologically. We all have masculine and feminine traits to varying degrees. And we've been taught and raised to value the masculine traits and suppress or dominate the feminine traits. That's how our society is built, and that's what we're taught by our parents. And it causes tremendous suffering, especially with the fact that most women, when they're pregnant with a baby, aren't fully supported as needed to really be in optimum health and well-being during the conception, for one. You know, I mean, how many conceptions are truly the full potential of mutual orgasmic creative expression? So often that initial conception experience is not really that for either or both of the conceiving parties. And so that's the beginning of each of our lives. And if it's not to that full potential of pleasure and creative, conscious creativity of bringing a new being to the world, then as we develop, that initial blueprint then gets expressed in various ways, especially because our mothers are usually then, you know, most of the time, mothers are under supported, feeling stressed, not really sure if they're going to have the support that they need as they're gestating this baby and to give birth to a baby. And if they manage to carry that baby to term, it's a very stressful and often traumatic process, given our modern birthing practices, some of which are very wonderful and save lives, and others of which are still influenced by this domination model. We need to dominate and control what's intrinsically feminine, or an expression of feminine power. And what more is there that expresses feminine power than childbirth, right? So that patriarchal model has influenced our birth practices very heavily. And they're often not really about what supports the woman and baby to have the healthiest outcomes. It's more about what's convenient for the doctors, or, you know, all these other ways that process is dominated and controlled. And so that initial blueprint in our life creates this suffering in all of us, that our mothers weren't fully supported, and then we don't fully develop all of our skills and abilities and to our full potential. We don't learn about emotional wisdom, which is one way that our mother's womb is meant to transmit to us. But most of our parents haven't even developed that themselves. So how can
that's true.
transmit that to us, right? And so, and we're not taught that pleasure, a life full of pleasure is our birthright, that pleasure is the way that to health and well-being. And we're not taught that, right? We're not taught that about our health. We're not taught that about our life. You know, we're this environment of domination and suppression creates a field of fear, anxiety, pain, struggle,
Mm.
and, like that. And just that whole, oftentimes abuse, trauma is a regular part of that. And you're just supposed to toughen up and get through it, right? Well, that's a huge source of suffering for everyone. Doesn't matter what gender we are.
Mm.
And I feel so strongly and am very passionate about my calling and this, as I've explored my own womb-centered healing work, which is, oh, wait a second, what was the source of my suffering? It started in the womb. It started with how I was conceived. It started with how I was gestated and how I was birthed and how I was raised as a child. And that all centered around how my mother wasn't supported in her feminine power to create a new life. She wasn't educated about it. She wasn't supported with it. My biological father was trained to take zero responsibility for his fertility, and my mother had no understanding of her own fertility. And she was taught to try to just please the men in her life in order to achieve any power, because they were the only ones that had any, and they were the only people that had any sovereignty. Right. And like that. And so, and for all kinds of, I mean, I could go on and on about, as I zeroed in on the source of the ways that I was suffering, and then also the source of healing often resides in the same place as the source of our pain. And so my pain was sourcing in the womb, and my experience in my mother's womb. And I realized, well, that's also the source of my healing, is in the womb. And so over the years of my, over 25 years of exploring, healing my own suffering patterns, my own patterns of struggle and pain, and my own, both biologically, chronic illness and pain, as well as emotionally and spiritually, my focus became more and more on the womb as both the source and remedy for that pain. And so this biomystical womb healing 9-moon apprenticeship is my way of creating a structure for other people that recognize this womb centeredness of our wounding, our pain and suffering, as well as our healing. Because, I mean, our womb can create a whole new life. And if we fully support our womb space, it can also do many other things, not just creating a baby. And that's one thing that that I really want to emphasize, because a lot of people come to me with questions. Well, if I don't have a uterus, why do I need womb healing? Well, you were born from one, for one,
Yes.
right? And if you used to have one and then you don't anymore because you had a hysterectomy or something else, then you have obviously some healing around whatever led up to that hysterectomy, and in the least, the scar tissue and the trauma around having that kind of a surgery of removing your womb, because our whole body is designed to protect and nourish the womb. And when we surgically remove it, a lot of medical doctors consider it to be a disposable organ, without recognizing that our whole body is designed to protect it, right? And you suddenly remove it, that creates
How do you
this.
notice that it's all that the whole body is designed to protect the womb?
Well, there's a lot of physiological things that bring me to that statement, based on my 25 years as a massage therapist. And then I've also been I've studied holistic health and well-being and women's health and herbalism, and I'm a childbirth doula and all of this. So in all of my studies, particularly with my hands-on work with people's bodies and the physiology of it, our trauma response for when we're in a stressful, potentially injurious situation. One of the primary trauma responses is the activation of our psoas muscle, which curls us up into a ball, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's 10 times stronger in women because we have a womb.
Okay.
And so the whole body is designed, and our psoas muscle, whether we actually curl up in a ball or not when we're under stress, it's still trying to. And so this is the reason why a lot of people have chronic strain and tension in their psoas muscle, because when we're under stress, every time we feel a shock or a stress, our psoas muscle is trying to curl us up into a ball. Okay. And what that curling up in the ball does is it protects the womb. It puts all of your hard, bony, big muscular places surrounding the womb. Okay. So then the womb is protected by your buttocks, your rib cage, your legs, your arms, because if we're open and not curled up in a ball, our belly, the soft belly, is exposed. And so that's why I say that. And then it's just sort of if you look at the plant realm, okay, and what plants do, okay, so a plant, their womb, the womb of the plant is the flower that then turns into a fruit or a seed pod. And that's how the plant reproduces, right? So when a plant is under stress, it withdraws all of its juices from all of the other parts of the plant, the leaves, the lower leaves first, and then slowly more and more of the leaves, putting all of its energy into the womb of the plant, the flower, in order to pollinate that flower and create a new a seed pod, a fruit, so that it can reproduce. And that's a biological number one priority for all species: plants, mammals, reptiles, insects. Reproduction is prime directive number one for all of us, biologically. Now, here we are, the most overpopulated species on the planet, but that biological imperative is still within us. And many of us might be choosing not to reproduce, myself included, for that very reason, that we're overpopulated. There's plenty of humans on the planet. We don't really need any more. But even though that's true, there's plenty of people that feel this strong need and desire to reproduce. And then what that translates to biologically, even in those of us who are choosing not to reproduce or can't reproduce or, aren't interested in that, is we still have this biological protection of our reproductive organs. It's instinctual because we are a living species. It's how we're designed. And that ensures the survival of all species, is that there's this instinctual prioritization of the reproductive organs and functions of the species. And so we, though, however, as a species, we've also somehow, it baffles me how we have been able to develop this suppression and domination of our reproductive functions. That, you possibly heard the term of sex positive. Well, the reason we have that term flying around is because there's been so much sex negativity. The idea that our sexuality is somehow sinful or bad, and there's no other species on the planet that thinks that way. Right? I mean, it's part of our basic functioning and our basic aliveness is our sexuality. And so we adopted this programming that sexuality and our reproductive functioning, particularly the female version of it, the womb, is something to be ashamed of, right? All the shame around menstruation.
Oh, yes.
We experience, and all of the ideas in all different cultures about how menstruation is dirty, how it's it's shameful, that, you know, all of that. And yet, how do we still manage to reproduce with all of this? It's baffling to me that there's so much suppression around it. And perhaps it's an instinctual response to overpopulation, but I don't, that doesn't hold water in my book, because this suppression began long before, many thousands and thousands of years before we have the overpopulation issues that we have now. I feel actually overpopulation is a result of the suppression of feminine creative power and reproductive power, because when women were sovereign in that and revered for that, I feel there would be more wise choices made, where women are going to want to have 1,000 babies. You know, women are going to be paying attention to the balance of the society and not be having a bunch of babies. It's really the patriarchal, masculine irresponsibility around their fertility and wanting to control feminine fertility and take women's power away from them around fertility that has, I feel, that's responsible for overpopulation. So, boy, I've gone on and on about lots of things. But so the point is that this biomystical womb healing 9-month apprenticeship is a journey that I've been putting together, a culmination of all of my work around this, where we will be looking at how the womb is actually a portal for spirit to take on physical form. And that goes for making a baby. It also goes for creating anything, artwork, business, a body of work.
I call it the weirding way.
The weirding way,
yes.
yes.
My group know I'm writing my forthcoming book about this.
Yes.
And you rest in the womb of all existence, which is the weird in the Norse language. You can also set intentions and be very creative. Everything gets born from this space, which is, I'm sure, not a coincidence. There are no coincidences in life anyway.
Yeah.
It's also perceived as the womb of all existence, or the Genandagam, the forever unfolding space of all possibilities, which is also the womb.
Right. Yes.
So it's like on the micro level within us, it's also on the cosmic level. It's all interconnected.
Yeah, and go ahead.
It's a very sacred space where I also like to rest in, or like to connect with. Right.
Yes, and this is why we always are wanting to talk to each other about our work and how it weaves together. And what you were just talking about brings up this idea of the triple womb experience that I weave into this biomystical womb healing process quite frequently, where we connect with the womb of Gaia, or the womb of Mother Earth, which is the source of all of this vitality, life force energy, the energy that comes up and out and helps everything to grow, right? Of the planet, out of the planet. And then we also connect with our own personal womb. And then we connect with the cosmic womb, which is the black hole at the center of the universe, the source of all creation, the source of all infinite potential. And then we circulate those energies through us, becoming a portal between heaven and earth, and bringing our spiritual embodiment fully into our bodies. And so that also resonates with some of the triple goddess work that I do, that comes into play here. And I know we spoke a little bit at the beginning, where I was telling you about how excited I am with some of the practices that I'm preparing for the apprenticeship. One of the practices is called Goddess Dance. I knew I wanted to weave in stories about the various goddesses and the mythology and the archetypes that have been influential to me in my healing process. And I was sitting with the goddess Diana because I have a co-creator. I have several guest instructors in the apprenticeship program who are offering unique aspects to what we're doing that I didn't necessarily have as much expertise in, or wanted to get their specific expertise to add and enhance the process. And they also want to participate in the apprenticeship. So we made these co-creative agreements, and one of them is she loves visiting sacred sites, and she lives in Budapest and travels all around Europe and Egypt. And she was in a place in Italy called Lake Nemi. Mm-hmm. And this is a lake with a temple. It's in ruins now, I believe, where the Egyptians and the Romans would come to worship first Isis and then Diana. Okay, so the goddess Diana, the goddess Isis have been worshipped at this lake and at this temple for many, many, many thousands of years. Mm-hmm. And we did the opening ceremony there, and then I was feeling called to connect more with the goddess Diana and perhaps do a Diana meditation, because Diana is known for embodying all three aspects of the triple goddess, maiden, mother, and crone. And I wanted to, and this is the triple goddess theme is woven in throughout the apprenticeship. And I wanted to start it out with a meditation of having Diana share with us and sort of give us a transmission about our own inner triple goddess capacities. Now, I want to say a few words about this, because I just got this book that you may be familiar with, or others may be familiar with, called Jailbreaking the Goddess. And in this book, it's an interesting book. I highly recommend checking it out. And you can see, as you're reading it, that it's a feminist book, and it's one of its main points is that the triple goddess archetype is actually part of the patriarchal oppression of women, limiting us to our reproductive function and enslaving our reproductive function. Mm-hmm. And I've never had children, and I've always felt very supported and nurtured by this triple goddess, maiden, mother, and crone archetype. And as I was reading this book, I'm like, it's only that way if you're buying into the womb being limited to reproducing and making babies. Because they're saying this triple goddess archetype is based on the functions of the womb, and therefore it is oppressive to women if you're limiting women to just the functions of their womb. Well, if you're limiting the womb to just the biological functions of the womb, and even then only a small portion of the biological functions of the womb, then you're buying into the patriarchal idea of what the womb actually is and does. And therefore, yes, that triple goddess archetype seems oppressive. But if you expand your awareness about what the womb actually is and what the womb actually does in its fullness, in its full reverence, and see that the womb is this powerful portal of spiritual energy and creative powerhouse, and that the cycles of the womb are a guide and an engine in our creative power, unlimited creative power. It doesn't have to be just creating a baby. Then suddenly this triple goddess archetype of the maiden, mother, and crone gives us a powerful map in reverence to the womb and the womb wisdom that we all have within us for our ability to create new life, not just through more babies, but transform our society and transform humanity into a new way of living.
Mm.
And so for me, that's the true liberation of the goddess, is saying, you know, let's get back to the origins before patriarchy skewed and twisted these ideas about what the womb was for, and, you know, started exploiting the womb for, and claiming ownership and
Mm.
controlling the womb, and saying, imagining what was it like for the 300,000 years that archaeologists have shown before patriarchy, when we were revering the womb,
Mm.
and where women's power to create new life was seen as this divine power that had many multitudes of applications besides creating babies. And when women were completely sovereign over their own abilities to create in however they chose to.
Yeah.
And so, you know, a lot of these ancient practices, like the weirding way and the goddess traditions, predate patriarchy, but have been twisted and appropriated by the patriarchy. So yes, I agree
I
in
can,
that
of
book.
course, stop thinking about the three norns, because I've been
Yes,
initiated into the weirding way by the three norns. There we have got the
yes.
triple, not goddesses, they are the giantesses. The norns are particularly interesting because they are the ones weaving the destiny of all physical matter. That includes elves, gods, everything which we see around us in etherical, energetical, physical matter. So they are the creatrixes of it all. And that's why I find them very, very interesting, because they are outside of time and outside of any concepts or ideologies. So very, very interesting. And there
And
again,
don't they have specific characters, the three different Norns? I'm curious about that, because, yeah.
They stand for the past, the present, and the future.
Aha.
Urt, Verdanti, and Skuld. But the interesting part is we live in different dimensions. If they weave destiny, then they get to the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil. And then they've got this energies of the past, present, and future. Obviously, if you rest in this all-encompassing weird, or the womb of all existence, there is no time. And then they're also part of the one. But if they come to rest in this physical realm, then we have got the past and the present and the future. And the mystery where we can all become conscious co-creators of our destiny is when we also get down to the root of our true nature, which is our core essence. And my experience of the weirding way is also resting in this void, and at the same time of all possibilities, which is the womb. And this is like the alchemical, the mysterious process. If we rest there, then we are outside of time. And then there's only the ever-present now. Weird in old English is also of becoming, the ever becoming. So in this space, we can create anything.
Indeed.
And then the triple number disappears as well, because then we're all one.
Right. And that's the same thing that happens with the triple goddess, because everyone of any gender can experience this. It's almost like the past, present, and the future, right? At least for me, the triple goddess, the maiden, represents my past, the mother represents my present, and the future represents my crone. But that just happens to be because I'm in that mother-like phase of life where I'm creating lots of things. But no matter where we are in our phase of life, we're mothering ourselves right then. So a maiden feels like she's creating lots of things, and might feel that her younger self is really the maiden, right? Or she may fully embody a lot of maiden principles then, and that the mother and the crone is more in her future, but she's creating herself. So she really is living that mother archetype now as well. She's giving birth to her new self every day, and she's guided by her inner wisdom and her dreams and her access to other realms, which is where her inner crone comes in to guide her. So she's totally well, and it takes some learning to have all three of those inner ways of being fully activated. And that's what we'll be doing in the apprenticeship, is integrating all of those and valuing all of those aspects of ourselves. And there's masculine forms of this triple goddess as well, where there's the young man or the page, and then there's the father or the king, and then there's the wise one or the wizard. And there's various different ways of describing those archetypes. And then, you know, we can free ourselves of those gendered ways of looking at it too, for those who are non-binary in their gender identification, trying to break free of some of the oppressive, domination oriented nature of what's been laying over our gender. And there's so many different genders too. There's like 11 different genders that happen naturally, biologically. 4% of the population of any species, any mammal or reptilian species that tends to have two genders, right? All of them have 4% of the population naturally born hermaphroditic in some way. So gender, I see, is more of a spectrum or a continuum, where some members of any given species, some people, some animals are really fully on the masculine end of the spectrum, and then there's a whole spectrum of varying degrees of masculinity till you get in the middle, where there's this 4% of different ways of being hermaphroditic, genetically or physically. Some have external genitalia of one gender and internal genitalia of the other gender. Some have physiological genitalia of one gender and then a psychological identification strong with another gender. And so that widens that 4% when you start to see the disparity between the psychological, the spiritual feeling of being a particular gender not necessarily matching with the physiological gender. So then you have this wider than 4% spectrum of, oh, what does the person really feel like, and how is that different from their biology? And then you have the whole spectrum of people who do identify as feminine gender and do have that physiological feminine. There's lots of range in that, of being very, very, very feminine and having more qualities of the masculine. And so I see it as this spectrum, and we get so limited thinking that you're only a real woman if you're like this, and you're only a real man if you're like this. And that extreme separation is part of the healing that we need to do, of saying, wait a second, it's a continuum. And sometimes I'm going to be a woman and have very masculine qualities and need to do very masculine things, or I'm going to be a man and have very feminine qualities and do very feminine things. And that doesn't make me any more or less a real man or a real woman. You know, and then that whole range of people that, you know, have one physiology and one and a different psychology or a different identity around their gender, and that's all a natural part of our genderedness as a human species. And so there's so much healing to be done around that. And I feel that womb-centered healing now, everyone has a womb space regardless of what biological gender we have. And there are many traditions that have a different name for it. So in some like in Chinese medicine and martial arts, the space is called the hara, or the lower Dan Qian, which is and this is referred to as an energy center, and it includes the physiology in that area, regardless of what gender you are. And in Hindu language and spirituality, it's called the Purusha, and it's located just below the navel and back towards the spine. And that's right where the womb is. That's right where the, right above where the prostate and other reproductive organs of anyone of any gender is. And that Purusha is considered the direct connection to your individual God self, your individual divinity.
Mm.
It's the direct connection where your divinity gets transmitted into your body. And so I feel that our divine inspiration, our divine soul purpose gets expressed through our womb space, regardless of what gender we are.
Well, what do you think about the link to the navel? Because I'm working with the destiny thread, which is obviously an invisible thread, but is also connected to the divine. And I find it very interesting that it's like the navel, where we get separated by birth, and then we lose contact and we lose or forget what our souls came for. And through very painful processes, people then start to remember or get interested in finding out their unique life thread. Do you think it's connected to the navel? Is that
Absolutely.
invisible thread to the divine and in our bodies? Absolutely.
And I always talk about there being an invisible umbilical cord that still connects us back through the generations of our ancestry and forward through the generations of our descendants. And I see that as being infused by our divine essence. And perhaps there's a more, that's sort of a horizontal thread, right? And perhaps there's a more vertical thread. In fact, I work with that vertical energy of perhaps the umbilical cord like energy, or pillar of energy, or stream of energy between the earth womb and the cosmic womb is more of a vertical thread of energy, and that perhaps that connects at the navel, and hence the imagery of the cross, right? Of the horizontal, the way that we're connected with each other and through time and space, back through the past and forward through the future with our ancestry, with that ancestral umbilical cord, that energetic umbilical cord. And then the vertical is connecting us with the cosmic womb and the earth womb.
Very interesting meaning of this imagery of the cross, which gets a total new understanding and way of looking at it. And of course, from the view of the Norns, then there are unlimited threads, because the web of weird again is the interconnectedness of everything. And if each one of us has got this invisible thread connected to the divine, there are so many different threads all at the same time building this net, which I call the web of weird, which encompasses it all. We are all connected on so many different levels and dimensions. Yeah, very, very interesting.
Indeed it is.
What interests me is why is it 9 months long?
Well, what else is 9 months long?
The pregnancy and the birth.
Yeah.
Is that there's
Yes, indeed. So, and then 9 is a powerful number that is very magical. If you look at how the number 9 functions in math, I get fascinated with that sort of thing and the geometry of the number 9. And,
since I mentioned the web of weird, there's exactly 9 dimensions. There is a rune. The rune is called Web of Weird. It contains 9 dimensions, 9 lines, out of which the whole universe, the world tree is made up. All the runes are made out of this 9 dimensions. Oh, I can go on about this forever.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And, so there's 9 months in the pregnancy. There's, when we turn 9 years old is when a child hits the age of 9, that's when we start to fully embody as the individuated being. And we start to individuate naturally from our parents and recognize our own direct connection with the divine in the ideal world. Unfortunately, many children aren't nurtured, and many people aren't aware of that 9-year change, and that doesn't get nurtured and supported. And so that's a source often of a lot of anxiety for children, because that's when we wake up to the fact that our parents are not perfect, and that we've been emulating and modeling ourselves after these beings, that they actually make mistakes. And a lot of 9-year-olds often have a lot of anxiety, and there's ways to remedy that in young children by teaching them how to take care of themselves. So in the approach to education that I studied, we would teach 9-year-olds in 3rd grade how to grow their own food, how to make their own clothing, how to make their own housing, make little housing structures and, playhouses and things like that, but using carpentry and actually making things for themselves, that they feel like they could take care of themselves. And that alleviates a lot of 9-year-old anxiety to address that. But anyway, we could go on and on about all of that too. But yes, number 9.
Time, and surely we can go on forever, but this is coming up like to an hour. And,
yes.
I think you have got an appointment, and me too.
Yeah.
Is there like something at the very end, final words you want to tell us about?
Well, just that if anyone is interested in this 9 Moon Apprenticeship, you can go to my website at wombcenteredhealing.com, and you can look on the page there on the menu. It says Biomystical Womb Apprenticeship, and learn more information about it. I will share that this is my first time running this apprenticeship, and I'm also writing a book. So I'm making it available to anyone of any financial means is welcome to participate at whatever level they can. If you're really inspired by it, but the financial means might not be there, you can be a case study participant where you contribute by writing about your experience and giving me permission to use your writing in my book. And so I have quite a number of participants who are doing that. And so the book then becomes this co-creative, collaborative project where we're sharing all of our womb wisdom in the book. So.
Great. And I also put the link on the page and then underneath this interview for the people who are interested to join. So
awesome.
Thank you very much, Sama. It was such a pleasure to talk about this.
Likewise, as always with you, Erica. Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.